Hi, everyone. Today, I have the great pleasure of talking about one of my favorite writers, Oscar Wilde. His real name was Oscar Fingal of Flaherty Wills Wilde, although he also used some pseudonyms such as 3.3 poems and Sebastian Melmoth. He was well known as Oscar Wilde. He was born on October 16th in Dublin, Ireland in 1854. He was an author, writer, poet, playwright, journalist, critics, and many others occupations he did during all his life. He also spoke English, French, and Greek. His education was, the basic education was in the Portugal Royal School, and he went to the college in Trinity College and Magdalena College in Oxford. He lived during the Victorian era at the late of the century 18th. He wrote different genres such as epigrams, the drama, short story, criticism, journalism, and he wrote a lot of words such as short story, essay, dialogues, comedy, drama, articles, chronicles, and so on. He was part of the literary movement known as aesthetic movement and decadent movement. Both of them were based on the beauty, the aesthetic, the classics, and also the realism, and many things about fiction. He died on November 30, 1900, at age of 46 in Paris, France. The cause of death was meningitis, but some writers speak about the real cause was syphilis. Oscar Wilde's early life. When he was, when he went to the university, he write and read about Grace. Grace was a literary movement about classicism, and he could demonstrate himself that he was one of the best classicist students. For that reason, she won a scholarship in order to get the title of the best classicist student in that era. When he was younger, he moved to London into fashionable cultural and social circles. As a spokesman for aestheticism and decadent movement, she made different literary activities, such as he published a book of poems, lectured in United States and Canada, on the New English Renaissance in art and interior decorations. When he finished that, he returned to London and worked as a journalist. Due to his great writing and speaking skill, he became one of the most known personalities at his day. And also, thanks to his writing skill, he also became a famous writer into the Victorian era. He became one of the most popular playwrights in London in the early 1890s. He was incarcerated from May 25th, 1895 to May 88th, 1897 for some issues related with his intimate life. After that, he wrote De Profundis, this work was published posthumously in 1905. The Wilde style of writing. The style of Oscar Wilde was in many ways so important and rich in content. He used different literary devices such as tone, diction, imagery, irony, allusion, symbolism, metaphor, personification, and so on. These literary devices always were part of his writings. And his writings were very witty and pointed, but easy to read in order according to her styles. He also was known for his clever core and sly sayings, sometimes self-deprecating irony. He usually mocked about the Victorian notions because the Victorian era was very serious, such as morally and obviously about the real life. Oscar Wilde tried the art as the supreme reality, and he thought that the real life was a fiction. Oscar Wilde and aestheticism. As I mentioned before, he was as a spokesman for aestheticism and decadent movement. Both of them are movement in art and literature. They were focused on aesthetic values of art more than social and political themes. For that reason, she usually was against the traditional values of the Victorian era, because aesthetics is most concerned with the appreciation of beauty rather than the underlying messages. Aestheticism is often opposed to realism, which is the attempt to depict life as it happens, and aestheticism practice art for art's sake. I need to talk about a little bit of the Victorian period, because we need to understand why Oscar Wilde and other writers were against the traditional values of this era. The Queen Victoria took throne in 1837 at 18. And this era was based on decorum and authority, because Victorians saw themselves progressing not also morally, but also intellectually. There were powerful middle classes obsessed with gently and decorum, and the writers couldn't talk about sex, birth, or death. The materialism, secularism, the vulgarity, and sheer waste that accompanied Victorian progress led some writers to wonder if their culture was really advancing by any measure. For that reason, Victorian writing reflects the danger and benefits to rapid industrialization, while encouraging readers to examine closely their own understanding of the era's progress. Remember that some writers were against the traditional values of the Victorian era, and Oscar Wilde was one of them. About the Oscar Wilde major works, he, as I mentioned before, he wrote a lot of words. He was an incredible writer, really, believe me. For that reason, he is one of my favorite writers. He wrote in prose, such as journalism and editorships. For example, the Pall Mall Gazette Daily Chronicle, The Woman's Word, Wilde left The Woman's Words, and shorter fiction, such as The Happy Prince and Other Tales. It was a famous shorter fiction. Another is Lord Arthur Saville's Crime and Other Stories, A House of Pomegranates, and The Portrait of Mr. W.H. Also write essay and dialogues, such as The Decay of Lying, a dialogue, Pen, Pencil and Poison, and The Truth of Max. He also made a theatrical career, and he wrote the drama Salome, a tragedy. It tells the story of Salome as the stepdaughter of the tetrarch Herod Antipas. Remember that Salome is Wilde emulate in many countries around the world. This is a famous drama. Also, Oscar Wilde wrote comedy of society, such as The Picture of Dorian Gray, Lady Winterman's Fan, A Woman of No Importance, An Ideal Husband, and also wrote lots of poems, such as Requiescat, The Burden of Iris, The Garden of Eros, A Villanelle, The Sphinx, and also the Ballad of Reading Gold, because this was one of the latest points that he wrote after he left the jail. Oscar Wilde's literary reputation. Oscar Wilde is a famous writer. Remember that his nationality was Irish, and his popularity rests largely on his novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, 1891. For me, it's a little funny because Dorian Gray talk about a man that never gets old, and at the end, he need to cut his picture, and in that way he could die. And I have people that have told me that I think like Dorian Gray because I'm 52, but people say that I'm not getting old. Another of his masterful comedy of manners, Lady Winterman's Fan in 1892, and The Importance of Being Earnest, 1895. This is one of the most popular words that he wrote. Let me tell you something about The Picture of Dorian Gray. The Picture of Dorian Gray was the only one novel that he wrote, and it is famous around the world, and it has film, it has written in many ways, and also is a spectacular writing. Finally, let me tell you some famous quotes from Oscar Wilde. For example, I can resist everything except temptation. It's really funny because I use this quote every time during my life. And what a surprise, it comes from of Oscar Wilde. Another famous quote is, true friends stab you in the front. And that's true, because when we are friends of people, we are going to say the truth in front of them, not on his back. Another is, always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. Remember that when we forgive, especially our enemies, or when we are getting successful, that is something that annoys them so much. And the last one is, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. This is pretty important because we need to believe in us. We need to be ourselves, because knowing who we are, then we can show who we are to the world, to the entire world. That's it. Thank you for your attention.